Welcome back, everyone, and welcome to our first alignment sessions. So during this series, we'll be going through some of the fundamental postures that we have and that we practice in the Ashtanga primary series. So for this course, that is the basis, the foundation, and most of the postures that we will look at. We will spend a little bit of time with a few other poses that are some of the most common postures that we see in a vinyasa class as well. So we'll sort of group those together into different categories and to different bases of support, which we will talk about in our teaching methodology. But we'll start from just breaking down our sun salutations, our Surya Namaskara A and B, as well as one additional practice, Surya Namaskara C, or classical sun salutations. And then we'll take a look at standing postures, open hips and closed hips. And then we'll shift into seated postures, also open hips, closed hips. And then we'll move towards inversions and our finishing series of Ashtanga. So it's more or less the breakdown of how we'll transition, almost like the structure of the sequence itself. So during these sessions, obviously this is a virtual course, so trying to kind of feel these things in your own body will be a little bit different without the guiding hands of someone adjusting you. So this is one of the best benefits of physical adjustments, is really having someone fine-tune your postures. So I'll try as best as I can to sort of give some of the common misalignments. So what people often have a tendency, or what I see teaching, the most common things where we want to make sure that we're sort of staying and steering clear from those things. And then other ways that we can refine movement in postures. Again, as we look at teaching, I always say for a beginner student, you can't integrate everything that your teacher is saying. So if you're new to yoga, you're a beginner student, and you're trying to just listen to the directional and instructional cues, then you're not necessarily always listening to all of the other instructions that your teacher is saying. And even if you are, you don't yet have the fine-tuned sense to actually see how that is in your body, or to change those things in your body. So just be aware of that as you're starting to sort of develop your toolbox of instructions and cues that you'll use for yourself. Just be aware that, again, I like to say that if you say something, or you say something, or you adjust someone and verbally, which is an instruction, is a cue. If you adjust someone and they're not moving or changing, why? Okay, so the first thing is maybe they actually didn't hear you. So maybe you're not speaking loud enough as a teacher. But generally the case is that you're speaking loud enough, but they don't understand what you mean. And we've all been in a place where we hear an instructor say something, and we're like, I'm not exactly sure what they mean. And during those cases, hopefully for yourself, you ask the teacher after class if you're not sure exactly what they meant. And then other times you'll hear an instruction that completely changes a pose for you. So that's sort of what we're aiming for, is we're aiming for a basic foundation of how to safely guide our students into a pose. How to safely guide them will be based on their level. So for a beginning student, I will have more transition and foundational cues. And then for a more intermediate and advanced student, I'll have more refinement cues. So that is where you get into kind of refining your own language, and to using some of the skills that you'll learn in anatomy, philosophy, if you're working with anatomical cues, philosophical cues, or energetic cues, that you can start to bring that into the way that you're speaking and the language that you're using. So we always want to use language that is relevant to our audience. So if we're very verbose and use all of this imagery that they don't understand, then it's not really helping them change their pose in any way. So just always have your audience in mind as you're developing your toolkit of instructions and alignment cues. Each one of us will say something a little bit different. You'll take classes on this course, and you'll notice that we all have a slightly different way of describing things, and that is based on our own experience. So your first fundamental cues or instructions that you're going to find are coming from your own practice and your own experience what you've been hearing in your practice, what your own teachers are saying, and what has connected and resonated with you in your body. So as we go through these postures, we'll break it down more or less, not always pose by pose. Again, once we kind of understand a general alignment about a group of postures, then we can see that those things stay the same. So we don't have to go every single pose. We can start to integrate and make those connections, those interlinks between some of the trends between asana families or types of postures and what's happening in the body. So our aim is to break down most postures. And as we look at them, we'll look at sort of two things. We'll look at the key alignments. So the key alignment is I would say 1 to 3 fundamental foundational element that doesn't change no matter the version of the pose that you're in. So it keeps the consistency of the asana, the integrity of the asana, and it's probably going to be one of the first things that we say as an instruction. So usually 1, maybe 2 most important things that you really want everyone to be doing in the pose as they come into that posture. And then the aim of a pose. The aim of a pose might change based on my desire. So as a teacher, maybe I want to do a specific version of a pose that's slightly more advanced, or I want people to stay in a different version to feel something different even if they can do something more advanced. So I might have a specific aim as a teacher, or I might base that on a student's needs. So if I find that a student is very limited, then sort of the full aim or expression of the posture might shift a little bit. But think of the aim as the final form that you're trying to get your students into. So have an intention as a teacher, and maybe they might do something different that's a little bit different than your aim, but know where you're working. So know those two things. So the basic foundation, the keys of the poses, which is what we'll talk about in these alignment sessions, and the aim. What am I working towards? And that also means you as a teacher, if you don't practice something, for example, Shirshasana headstand. Let's say I'm not practicing headstand yet, but I know all of the basic foundation. I know the keys. I know what needs to be stable in the body. I know how to spot someone safely. So even if I can't do something, I can still teach it, but I understand the aim. I understand what a student is working towards. If I'm not sure of the aim, if I'm teaching something that's not in my practice, which you don't have to do, many people will disagree whether you should or should not do that. But if you're teaching something that you yourself cannot do, you have to be really, really clear about the aim, because it's not something you've felt in your own body yet. So just be cautious as you get into teaching more advanced poses. Again, we're sticking with very foundational postures. This is a 200-hour course. So even when we get into some of the alignment for the Ashtanga primary series, that's more for your own practice. It's not that those postures are necessarily relevant for a beginner or an open level class, okay? So again, make sure you have some tools that are close to you as we do these sessions. Try to have 2 blocks if you have them at home. If not, again, 2 very thick books should also be okay, or a very firm pillow. A strap or a towel if you don't, and then a blanket. So we'll look at each posture, mostly breaking them down, the keys, the aims, how we can modify them. So modification is a bit more for a beginner. How we can advance them, or what's a deeper version of that pose that maybe we give as an option to a more intermediate advanced student. The props that we're using to do those things, and then common misalignments, as I said. So it often, maybe we don't know exactly always specifically what we want in a pose, but we know what we don't want. So looking at it from that perspective can be easier for some of us, okay? So we'll break down, during these sessions, we'll break down Surya Namaskara A, Surya Namaskara B, Sun Salutation A and B, and take a look at sort of that third variation on classical sun salutations, which has many different versions, and sort of our more traditional Hatha as a style. Has many different variations on this, but I'll teach a very simple one that we'll take together.